So we discussed Lot. We got about halfway through Lot last week when we discussed the fact that Lot is Abraham's nephew, not his cousin or his any other type of relationship there. He's his nephew. We talked a little bit about secular history as well, and then we looked at Genesis chapter 13 and noted how Lot and Abram they were having some issues with their herdsmen and their livestock, and because they were just so numerous, there were a lot of issues logistically keeping everybody on track and doing what they were supposed to be doing. It sounds like there was a little bit of hostility there among the herdsmen and so forth. And so Abram says, hey, let's separate. You go one way, I'll go the other. Pick which way you want to go. Lot chose the fertile ground, which, as we discussed last week, presuming or assuming Lot knew nothing of Sodom and Gomorrah. He didn't know about the evil nature of the cities in the plain of Jordan. He saw, or at least what the scriptures tell us, is that all he was thinking about was the fertile land. It was green. There was lots of grass and water for his cattle, for his livestock, and so that's why he chose that area. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. So we see towards the end of chapter 13 how that after they separate, Lot goes his way, Abram goes his way, and God tells him after they've separated to look over all you see. This is what I'm going to give you, you and your descendants forever. This is the land that will be for you and your family forever. And then starting in Genesis chapter 14, we see how while Lot is living in and around the area of Sodom in the plains of Jordan, we see some political issues taking place, some warfare going on, and Lot becomes captive. We're not going to read all of this, but we see that starting in verse 3, there's a bunch of kings that joined together, and in verse 4, they had been serving kind of as tribute for 12 years to Chedorlaomer, and then in the 13th year they rebelled. So they all are going to war. We see in 14th year that they attack their fame in Ashtaroth and Karnaim and Zuzim and Ham and so forth. All of these people are involved in all of this. And in verse 8, the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, title king of nations, Amraphel, and some of these other guys. So we see in verse 10, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. And so in verse 11, they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. And then in verse 12, it says, they also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So we see how that the kings of the cities of the plain, Sodom, Gomorrah, the city known as Zoar, which also goes by the name of Bela, they all go to war against this fellow to whom they were paying tribute. They rebel and ultimately are defeated. And we see in verse 11, they take all the goods, they take all the valuables. But in addition to that, they take Lot and his goods. Why?
Because he had a lot of goods.
Okay, yeah, he was worth a lot. Okay, now that's not to say Lot, I don't think, was involved. We don't read any record of Lot being involved in any of the politics or the rebellion or anything like that. But Lot, it's possible Lot was one of, at least, the wealthiest men of the area. Okay, remember, both he and Abram are very wealthy. They have a great deal of livestock, and of course, in that time, livestock was wealth. And so Lot, being as wealthy as he was very valuable. And so, but it's interesting to me that they take Lot, they don't kill him. Why do you think that might be? They capture him. Sorry? Okay, he might have been well known. That's kind of what I was thinking too. They may have even considered using him as ransom to try to get Abram to give them more money or something like that, if they knew of that in a relationship or whatnot. But regardless, he was probably well known. Yeah, he was well known. They knew of his wealth, but they took him, they took his goods, his livestock, his servants, all of it. They went off. And so in verse 13, one who had escaped, came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, the brother of Aner, and they were allies with Abram. Now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his house, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods, and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. Okay, so Abram gets involved. He finds out that Lot was taken captive. One of the servants or somebody escapes and goes and tells Abram. Abram says, okay, so he gathers up a posse together, 300 and some odd people, all servants who were trained and they had been born in his house. That speaks to, first of all, it speaks to wealth. Second of all, that speaks to kind of a longevity of well-known, well-training. And then he goes and pursues. Now, it doesn't say how large this other army was or the people who had taken Lot, how big of a group that was. It doesn't say. But apparently that 300 and some odd were enough. And certainly who else was with them? God. Certainly God was with them as well. But we see in verse 16 that Abram at least is successful in recovering Lot and the goods. And so he brings back, but verse 16, his brother Lot. Why does it say it's his brother when earlier it says it's his brother's son? Relative. Okay. Yeah, this is a very generic term, and a lot of times that kind of throws people when it gets translated something like this. People see brother when really it means someone related to them, kin. Okay? Moses has already detailed for us that this is Abram's brother's son. Okay, we've already know the relationship. But now it says in verse 16, his brother, this is his kindred, his kin. Okay, not literally his brother. That's why sometimes these terms, they can be very generic in that way. So his brother Lot, his kin Lot, and his goods, as well as the women and the people. So those who were with Lot, just as Moses, or I keep saying Moses, I'm sorry. This is Abram, had servants, had women who were dwelling with him, his servants' wives, and so forth, children, all of those people, all of those goods. Lot also had however many people. Doesn't say how many people were taken total, but it wasn't just Lot. It was all his servants, their families, and so forth. They were all taken. Abram recovers them. Anything through this particular event. Now, just kind of as a thought, we have both the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Zoar, these cities of the plains of the Jordan. Many of them died in this great battle. We also know that they were in rebellion against somebody who was far superior in manpower and in army at least, because he defeated them. If you're Lot, what might you think about doing? You might think about moving. Okay? Now, whether or not that was possible is a different question. But if I'm Lot, after I get back and I'm blessed enough, Abram has been able to rescue me, my family, my servants, my livestock, all the goods. Once I get back and settled, I'm thinking, okay, well, this may not be the last time Sodom gets into a political problem here. Maybe I ought to move along somewhere else. He doesn't do that. Again, that's not necessarily a wrong or bad thing, but we've already noted a little bit of a pattern of maybe a little bit of an issue with foresight. Okay, maybe not thinking all the way down the line into all the possible scenarios that may come about because of decisions that he made. Again, hindsight's 20/20. It's easy for us to say that. He's having to live this. But regardless, it kind of is interesting because we know here in a little while or later, a couple chapters, we know the situation with Sodom and Gomorrah and what's going to happen. And so it's interesting that Lot doesn't choose to leave. He goes right back to where he was. And of course, Peter tells us that Lot was a just man and was fully aware and was tortured by the sinful deeds of the peoples of Sodom and Gomorrah. So it wasn't like he necessarily even liked the place per se, but maybe more so for the fact that he was established there, he was known there, and he would have a lot to move. Okay, I've got 4 kids, and it's a lot to move. Imagine having to move hundreds of servants and your cattle and all that stuff. So that's a lot of stuff. So maybe it was just kind of the logistics of it just didn't make sense to him. Nolan?
Possibly on the flip side of it, if he was any bit tuned into the wickedness of those cities in particular, well, those kings and leadership have been wiped out. There's been battle, and you would think a time of peace now. Maybe it's a time of opportunity, or thinking things might change.
That could be. That could
We
be.
don't know.
Maybe, and of course, Lot being the type of would community leader maybe be an appropriate way to describe him? Well-known, wealthy, perhaps influential. Okay, maybe he thought he could influence for good. Okay, that's a possibility.
Abram bringing him back saying, you ought to move.
Yeah, we don't read of Abram saying, "Hey, get out of Dodge." Yeah, we don't hear him say that. That's true. Good point. Yeah. All right. Anything else to this event? All right. So let's flip over to chapter 19 of Genesis. So we've got some things going on with Abram. We have the promise about the son. Sarah says, well, I guess we got to help God with this. So she gives Abram Hagar, and we have Ishmael being born and so forth. And then in chapter 19, we have the situation taking place in Sodom. Chapter 19 and really mainly just chapter 19 is kind of really the foremost attention, I guess, that we get in terms of Lot and the events in his life. Starting in verse 1, we have 2 angels who came to Sodom in the evening. Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom, and when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, "Hear now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night, and wash your feet, that you may rise early and go on your way." And they said, "No, but we will spend the night in the open square." But he, Lot, insisted strongly. So they turned into him and entered his house, and he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Why was Lot insisting strongly?
Because he knew the sinfulness of the city.
Yeah. He knew exactly the type of mentality and attitude the men of the city are going to have about the situation. So he's in the gate. It's not like he knew these 2 individuals were coming. We're told that they're angels, but does Lot know that they're angels at this point? No, as far as he knows, they're just men, okay, because they appear as men. And as a result, we see him sitting there for what purpose, would you imagine? He's sitting at the gate before you get into the city. Why is he there? Okay. Leadership? Maybe he's waiting for people who are traveling.
Protect the innocent.
Protecting the innocent.
But he's got conscience, he's protecting those that he knows are coming in, and what would happen if he did not protect them.
Yeah. Of course, being as wealthy as he is, like Lisa said, a lot of times you had leaders who would sit in the gates of the city, but it doesn't sound like there's any other leaders there. It's just Lot. It's in the evening as well. Many of them may have turned in at this point. Maybe Lot was out there with the leaders and the rest of them turned in, but he stayed out. And you imagine, it's almost as if he's waiting for anybody who might be passing through, who might be traveling and need a place to stay. And Lot wants to make sure he protects them. He takes care of them because he knows the type of behaviors that these men of Sodom are involved in. Thoughts so far? No.
Into verse 2 there, it's just kind of pre-hotels, you would seek out, we're just going to stay out here in the open.
Just sleep on the side here.
Courthouse Square or whatever.
Yeah. And, Lot doesn't go into any explanation, it doesn't sound like. He insisted strongly, but it doesn't sound like he necessarily explained why that was a bad idea. Okay, of course, Lot knows. So we see in verse 3, of course, and what does it say in verse 2? You can come into your servant's house, spend the night, wash your feet. What's Lot offering? He's offering, he says, your servant's house. Okay, Lot is offering to serve them, to take care of them. And then we see in verse 3, he made them a feast. He baked unleavened bread. Okay, so he makes them food. He gives them a place to sleep. And depending on how you read that, he may have washed their feet, or maybe he was offering them the opportunity to wash their feet at his house, either or. But in verse 4, now before they laid down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them. Now, the term carnally is italicized because that's added in because of the implication of the phrase to know them. Okay, this phrase is the same as Adam knew his wife and she bore a son. Okay, this is that type of a situation. And so in verse 6, obviously Lot knows full well what the situation is. He knows that this is the type of behavior these individuals are involved in. And it also apparently did not go unnoticed. Okay, whether the streets were deserted or not when Lot took them to his house, people knew about it. People were aware that these individuals were taken to Lot's house. And it almost makes you wonder if the people of the city, maybe this is something Lot did on a regular occasion. Okay, it makes you wonder if the people of the city were like, that Lot's going to try to keep people from us. It's like he always does. It's kind of interesting how that they knew to go to Lot's house and, hey, bring them out. So in verse 6, Lot went out to them through the doorway and shut the door behind him. Why? Protection. Maybe also privacy. Okay, maybe he doesn't want the men inside to maybe know what's going on. But he goes out, he shuts the door, and at the very least, it's a clear signal, I'm not letting those men come out. Okay, I'll come out, I'll talk to you, but I'm not leaving the door open as if there's an opportunity for you to rush the door. I'm shutting the door behind me. And in verse 7 it says, please, my brethren. Of course, they're not his literal brother. This term is not kin. This is those whom he considers they should be friends because they live in the same city. Do not do so wickedly. See now, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof. All right, so you've got a situation where Lot, he's trying to protect these 2 men. All right, which is good. Okay, that's good. But Lot offers his daughters in their place, which you would think is not so good, right? Some have suggested that Lot knew full well that the men of the city would not be interested in his daughters, so he didn't feel like it was a risk. But then why offer them if that's the case? If he knew they weren't going to accept. It's kind of an interesting scenario, an interesting situation. I don't know what the status of his daughters was, whether they were involved in a lot of the wickedness as well. We do know that Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters were allowed to escape the city. We don't know what their status was in terms of their faith in Jehovah. Of course, later we're going to see some of what their mindsets were and activities were. But at least right now, maybe that was something that Lot felt like that's the lesser of 2 evils. It's kind of an interesting situation but Lot is desperately trying to keep these 2 men safe. Again, he doesn't know they're angels. They're just 2 innocent travelers coming through, and he doesn't want them at the hands of the people of Sodom. Thoughts or comments through this? All right, verse 9. And they said, stand back. And then they said, this one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. The only way or only real scenario that makes sense for them to say that is if this wasn't the first time that this has happened. Okay, we mentioned that before. But it says he keeps acting like a judge, as if there are some other occasions that have transpired. Maybe not the same exact situation, but either because Lot maybe didn't involve himself in something, maybe he said something about the evil wickedness or whatever, maybe he said something about that. I don't know. But the people said, he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. So whatever had happened in the past with Lot and the people of Sodom, this was it. This was the snapping point. We're done. Okay, we've put up with your righteousness or your just. Remember, Peter calls him a just man. Okay, we're tired of having, at the very least, his example there. And of course, can an example condemn somebody just as easily as words can? Sure. If Lot's not partaking in the same type of wickedness that the rest of the people are partaking in, and they find out it's because he's a servant of Jehovah, well, what does that suggest? It suggests that there's a standard that we're not following, that he is. And so people all the time today sometimes make that jump, that conclusion, when we don't even have to say anything. Nolan?
I think this is probably not so uncommon. We run into neighborhoods or entire cities or towns where if you're not from here, you're not of here.
Right.
And you'll never fit in. We won't let you.
Yeah.
But part of the things about Lot, he has also put himself in harm's way to step outside the house and bolt the door behind him.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand all of his speech and exactly why he's offering all that, but he is out there facing down and to protect two people who are strangers, never met before.
That's right. That's right. And again, there may have very well, several commentators suggested that there may have very well been some prior knowledge as to how these individuals were going to react about his daughters. So maybe it wasn't a risk. Of course, even they asked the question, so why offer it in the first place? It's kind of odd. But it does show that he has a mind of a servant. He's seeking to serve these men, to protect them. He brought them into his house for that purpose. But now the people of Sodom have said, no more. Whatever else has happened in the past, this was it. And so in verse 9, they said, we're going to deal with you worse than them. We don't hear Lot's response, but at the end of verse 9, so they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. So Lot's standing in front of the door. The crowd is trying to press in. So not only are they going to take Lot, but they're going to break down the door and take the two men inside. Nolan?
Just the thought, it seems on my lifetime that the first response, or kind of what yours, we put Lot in a bad light by some of his choices and this, that, and the other. But I think more, Peter's statement, him being a just man, did he have realization of these cities and people and think, I can go there and be a good influence?
Yeah.
Now, in the
It
end,
could be.
that doesn't turn out to be the case.
Right.
Get out of there.
Right. It could be. It could be that he knew in the moment that, he made the choice, the choice for the fertile land for his livestock and so forth. That's where I want to go for them. And the fact that these are wicked cities, maybe I can help. Maybe I can be an influence. It could be. We're not told about what his mind was in that situation, but you're right, it could very well have been. And at the very least, when he did get there, he didn't immediately turn around and leave. Of course, he couldn't have known what future events are going to transpire, but what he did do was he stayed, he settled, and he didn't turn into like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plains. He didn't become a wicked person. He didn't allow that influence on him, at least not through what we know. He tried to do what was right. And that's why Peter calls him a just man. Not that he was perfect, because we know he's not. But he tried to do what was right in a society that was extremely wicked, extremely sinful. Did I see a hand over there anywhere? Okay. All right, so verse 11. So in verse 10, it says, but the men reached out, talking about the two men that are actually angels. The two men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. Amazingly, they were able to get Lot inside without anybody else getting in. That must have been a really, really quick and timely thing to be able to do that. They struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. We don't know how many men are out here. It could be 30, it could be 300. But all of them, through the power allowed by God to these angels, were struck with blindness. And once they became blind, of course, it's evening anyway, but you got to figure the city's going to have torches, the city's going to have some lights, and they can't see a thing. And whether it was just the blindness or possibly because of the blindness there was the added confusion of it all. But what does it show? What are they still trying to do despite the blindness? They're still trying to get to the door. And that has struck me for so long, that in the midst of them all becoming blind, they don't all just say, maybe we should leave Lot alone tonight. Okay, maybe we should just back up. That doesn't happen. It sounds as though they're still trying to find the door, despite the fact that they're blind. And if that's the case, it just speaks to the depravity. It speaks to the primal nature of wickedness that we see in these people.
I think another indication of that is back up in verse 9, and I forgot, we will deal worse with you than with them.
Yeah.
They were aware what their intentions with the two guys inside were bad, and we're just going to take it a step further with you. So
right.
The depravity you're talking about, they're aware of how they act or
Oh,
what
yeah.
their character's like.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's a good point.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, they are fully aware of what all their intentions are. And whether this was a regular event, whether this was something that maybe had happened in the past with sojourners and travelers, and maybe it happened once or twice, and Lot says, no more, I'm going to wait for them from now on. I'm going to protect any travelers coming through, because I don't want that to happen again. And we don't know what the history was. Obviously, there was a history. But these people are not deceiving themselves at all. They're fully aware of the depths of their own depravity. They don't care. That's really what it boils down to. They don't care. And of course, it is an interesting contrast, like stark contrast, between Lot, this just man, and this entire city of wicked people. In fact, we're told it was all the people of the city. Okay, certainly at least the men. We're not told about any of the women, but at least the men are there. Anything else through verse 11? All right, verse 12. So the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here? Son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, whomever you have in the city, take them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Now, this is an interesting statement that these angels make. It says that the outcry against them. What outcry? What outcry has become so great? Who is crying out against them? Is it just Lot? Lot knows how bad they are, and I'm sure Lot has prayed about it. Maybe Lot's wife, maybe Lot's family, I don't know. Maybe how religious, how faithful they were. But Lot may have been. What other scenario could be included in that? Because this isn't the only time where God or God's messengers have referenced the outcry has been so great against this or against that. What other time have we seen this, or will we see this in the future?
Could have been from within Lot and his family, their prayers,
Could be.
things they have
It could be.
offered up.
You remember when the children of Israel, the Hebrews, were trapped in Egypt, and God is speaking to Moses through the burning bush, and God speaks about the situation with the Hebrews and how that the outcry of their bondage has become so great. Of course, those are God's people. And it makes you wonder, and of course it could very well just have been Lot, or just Lot's family. But it makes you wonder, what about all the innocent people who may have been harmed by these individuals of this city? And it's not necessarily saying faithful people, but people who were just traveling through. And as a result, were harmed or killed as a result. It just kind of makes you wonder, obviously God sees all things. He knows about everything that happens. Whether Lot and his family were the only ones lifting up their voices, or maybe there were others, maybe just crying out because of the great wickedness and the great harm that had been caused, maybe not even necessarily directly to Jehovah, but people who had been harmed, families who had been broken as a result of the wickedness of these people, and maybe some of that was included as well. Does God hear everyone? A lot of times people say that God doesn't hear the prayers of sinners. Does God hear everything? Did God hear Cornelius' prayers and alms? He did. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean God's going to answer the prayers of those who aren't serving him, but he hears everything. And it just kind of makes you wonder, the outcry against them has grown great, as if it started off and it's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And it may just speak to the history of how bad, for how long, this place has been. And not just this city, but we know there are other cities as well. So, in verse 14, Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughters, and said, "Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city." But to his sons-in-law, he seemed to be joking. Presumably, these two, apparently, if these are the same two daughters that he referenced earlier, it may very well have been that he had more daughters than that, and that he was referencing two daughters who were not yet married. Now, these sons-in-law who may have married his other daughters, that might be the situation, but regardless, we see the sons-in-law, they don't listen. He's joking. Verse 15, when the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." It may have been that Lot had other daughters who weren't there. Maybe those sons-in-laws, for whatever reason, were there, but his other daughters weren't. I don't know. However, the common thought process was that these two sons-in-laws were sons-in-laws to the two daughters that he offered up to the people. But didn't Lot say that they had not known a man? One of our questions on our notes, the second question, did Lot lie when he said that his daughters were virgins even though they had husbands? Okay, that's the one scenario that would explain both sides of that. Is if these sons-in-law, they were technically sons-in-law. Remember, betrothal is a little bit stronger of a relationship than engagement, but it's not marriage. And generally speaking, you were betrothed for a year before the actual marriage takes place, and then after that, you consummate the marriage. So betrothal is a little bit more than engagement, thus they're considered sons-in-law, not just fiancés or sons-in-laws to be. That, for all intents and purposes, was their relationship, but maybe they simply hadn't consummated the marriage yet. And that could very well have been. The other possibility, like we said, was that there were more daughters and sons-in-laws out there, and it would seem likely that he would have more than just two daughters. You would think there'd be a whole lot more family out there. We don't know. It doesn't say. But regardless, at the very least, his two daughters, he had two daughters there who, I don't think Lot was lying, Peter called him a just man, who had not known a man. So, verse 16, while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his two daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. So, it's interesting that they're in such a hurry. Because, can't God just wait? So what if they take an hour, or 2 hours, or 3 hours? Can't God just kind of, why the rush? Why the hurry? The angels literally take their hands and apparently pull them out of the city. Why the rush? Just postpone the judgment for a little bit. Why do you think that is? All right.
Well, Abraham had already asked if there's 10, and clearly showed there wasn't.
Right.
There comes a point when God says,
That's it. Time's up. And I think that's a very important point to show that God had set a time. And this is it. And the angels knew that. It's not like the angels could just say, well, God, he's kind of taking a little bit extra long. Just hold up for a little while. No. There was a set time God had decided he was going to destroy these cities. Not only that, from God's end, but from Lot's end as well. The sense of urgency needed to be shown. The sense of destruction that was coming needed to be shared. And that's what these angels conveyed to Lot and his family. Not just by saying, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. They grabbed them and dragged them out of the city because it's coming. And if you're stuck here, you're going to get destroyed right along with it. It's God's time. And God says, this is it. No more. And so in verse, and of course it also speaks to the fact that when God says, get out now, what should you do? You get out now. You don't sit around and take your time and lollygag. You get out. Kind of an important point to make, I think. But in verse 17, it came to pass when they had brought them outside that he said, escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed. So the angels, or at least angel, speaks here and says, you need to get out. Okay, he brought them out of the city. Now go. Get out. Okay, you got to run to the mountains. In verse 18, he says, don't do what? Don't look back. Don't look behind you. Verse 18, Lot said to them, please no, my lords. Indeed, now your servant has found favor in your sight. You have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me, and I die. Okay, so and in verse 20 we see Lot says, hey, there's a city over here. It's small. Can I stay there? And he's fine, go. It's interesting because, first of all, apparently, at the very least, it would seem that Lot now knows they're angels. Okay? Lot believed them, which is why he went to his sons-in-law and says, God's going to destroy the city, let's go. And the sons-in-law, Okay, so Lot believed them when they said this. I kind of sort of think striking the entire city with blindness was probably a telltale sign of that. But he knows that these individuals are from God. So in verse 19, he says, thanks for saving me. I appreciate it. But I cannot escape to the mountains because what might happen? I don't know if they have bobcats in that area. A bobcat might maul me, or a bear, or whatever else they may have out there. Some have suggested that this is a lack of faith on Lot's part. That if the angels have gone to this much trouble, and God, for that matter, has gone to this trouble to send angels to rescue Lot and his family, and now they're telling him to go to the mountains. Don't you think God's going to look after you to go to the mountains to keep you safe? You would think, right? Lot isn't condemned for this. Okay, you and I can look back in hindsight and say, okay, maybe he should have just trusted the angels when they said run to the mountains. He didn't. Okay, at that point, that's fine. But in verse 20, he says, see now this city is near enough to flee to. It is a little one. Please let me escape there. See, it is not a little one. My soul shall live. And so he said to him, this angel speaking, see, I have favored you concerning this thing also, in that I will not overthrow this city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city, which we know before was Bela, or Bela, therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. All right, we will stop here. We will pick up and finish Lot next Wednesday night. Thank you, everybody.